Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is the Lower Astral, the human pile. Before we get into it, I just want to extend my thanks to everyone for your messages of support. Last week it was really touching. It's been a very tough period of time for me. My wife and my daughter told me I just wasn't the same. I just kind of finally recovered recently as far as my emotional state. We still haven't been able to astral project out of the lower astral, but rather than concentrate and worry about why I can't get out of the lower astral, I figured, well, let's explore the lower astral. It's something that I never really have a chance to do. And I'll get into that in a second. First, I want to thank Giovanna, who is now a new Patreon member of Astral Club, and she is an Astral Scout. If anything, or if anybody is interested in supporting Astral Club, you'll find a link to Patreon in the description. So, the lower astral and the human pile, what are those things? Now, a lot of you probably know one or both of these things, but I think it's probably necessary to get into a little bit of detail ahead of time. The lower astral is literally the level of the astral that is the closest to the physical plane. And in that last episode, when I was challenging the master, he exiled me. I don't know what he did, but he did something to exile me to the lower astral. I can't get out of that now, but at least I can astral project. So the lower astral is generally the first place that newer astral projectors end up, and people who pass over typically end up there as well. There are very many similarities between the physical and the astral, the lower astral, but there's also quite a bit of differences too, which is why some people who are new projectors doubt what they've accomplished, because they astral project and they notice that what they see around them is not necessarily an exact copy of the physical world. And there's a very good reason for that, because it's not the physical world. You are now in the lower astral, the lowest level of the astral. And in essence, there are shadows that are shown from the physical world onto the astral, but there's also differences. It also makes sense, though, that many people who pass over, especially if they do so suddenly or violently, don't necessarily realize immediately, like I said, if it happened very quickly, that they've actually passed over. They think they're in some sort of weird dream, or they don't understand why people won't talk to them, or what have you. So, the lower astral is a very grim, very gray place. It's typically populated by lost souls who've been there for a while, people who are addicted to a variety of things from the physical, whether it be sex or drugs, anything that could hold someone to the physical plane. They don't want to leave. And it's also, like I said, the place where people can transition through. Typically, when I astral project, if I'm in the lower astral, I'll just ascend. And you can do that by flying, helps you to raise your vibrations, for instance. And there's a number of other ways as well. And we've talked about some of those things in the past. Okay, so the lower astral. Now, typically, I haven't explored that very much in the past because it is unpleasant. I've been there certain times, and I've helped out souls that were trapped from time to time. But I've never really spent a lot of time just exploring it because it's an unpleasant place. And typically, what happens is you attract attention. If you're vibrating at a higher level, you're kind of like a lighthouse, and you're drawing in all kinds of things. and you have to put up shields, and it could just become an unpleasant situation. You can feel like a rock star who's trapped in a situation where all these fans are mobbing him. And I understand why they don't want to be in a situation. So perhaps you might understand why I wouldn't want to be in that kind of situation. And this happens to a lot of folks who don't belong on the lower astral. So, what I have found since I've been exiled to the lower astral by this master is that I am no longer assaulted or swarmed by these lower astral denizens. I am now accepted as one of them. I, I don't know that that's a good thing, but at least it allows me to explore without having to worry about fending off a variety of individuals or creatures. So I started thinking that, okay, so as this time is not wasted until I find some way to regain my ability to ascend to the higher astral planes, that I might as well take advantage of this time and do some investigation that otherwise I would never have done. In the books of Robert Monroe, most people who have read extensively have certainly read Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe. But one of my favorite books of his is Far Journeys. Now, that's not as popular a book, but it's got a lot of very interesting and advanced concepts in it. One of the things he talked about was the whole concept of loosh. And I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole ballywick in and of itself. And I made a video about loosh. But the other concept that I found very oddly compelling in a very weird way was when he went to visit something called the human pile. He had been having some difficulties when he was astral projecting. A lot of emotions can become very much accentuated, magnified in the astral. And he was experiencing a sexual drive that was becoming hyper when he went into the astral. And he was trying to find some way, I think, to get a handle on this situation because it was interfering with some of his astral projections. And anyone who's done extensive amounts of astral projections will notice that your emotions and various drives can at times become very strong, whereas at other times that's not a problem. At any rate, he sought out some way to deal with this. And what happened is he was drawn to this area of the lower astral. And he saw a sight that beggared description. When I traveled there myself, I zoned in on the human pile, that vibration, the visualizations that Robert Monroe talked about when he wrote Far Journeys. And I arrived far away from the human pile. And I'll get into what it is in a second. And from far away, it looked like some sort of a mountain of sorts. But a very oddly colored one. And as I started moving closer, I noticed that this mountain, which I don't even know if I could explain to you how big it was a mountain. I mean, picture a mountain that you might see, somewhere on the East Coast, one of the Appalachian Mountains, let's say. It's not as bad as the Rockies, but say an Appalachian mountain. And as I got closer, I noticed that this mountain was moving. It was shifting like a kettle of worms. If you've ever gone fishing and you've bought a group of worms, you'll notice that they're constantly moving and shifting and changing position. And it was horrifying to see something like this. At first, I thought it was some sort of group of animals. That was obviously my first assumption. But as I got closer, I noticed that these were humans. These were humans, and they were naked, and they were all together in this enormous, enormous mound, this mountain. And they were all attempting to recapture this feeling of sexual union that they had become addicted to in the physical. The radiation coming off of these people was intense, but the mere sight of what was going on was so repulsive that I had no problem dealing with fending off that type of energy. I would no sooner dine out of someone's garbage can than I would get involved in this sick, sick situation. Now, I did the same thing that Monroe did. I went over and tried to rescue one or two people, and I tried to pull at the nearest person's leg and another person's arm. One was a man, one was a woman. I got each of them half out, and I was able to see their expressions, and their expressions were mindless. It was just an animalistic expression. You could tell that whatever higher abilities they ever had were gone. They were trapped in this hellish self imprisonment with all these other, I don't even dare guess how many. I don't know. Hundreds of thousands? Millions? I don't know. If it wasn't so sick, I would compare it to trying to guess how many jelly beans you got in this big old bowl. I'm lousy at that. But it depressed me because, my goodness, I mean, these are humans, and they have allowed themselves to completely devolve into an animalistic situation. And it was useless trying to do anything for them. I couldn't reach them. I could no more talk to either one of the people I pulled out than I could talk to a badger or any other animal, for instance. There was literally no understanding. As a matter of fact, I'm sure I'd probably have infinitely more luck with a dolphin or a dog any day of the week than I would with these people. They devolved so far. So I got the heck out of there because there was really nothing else I could do. I was one of those things that I figured, well, I'm stuck in the lower astral. That description that Robert Monroe made in Far Journeys, it stuck with me all those years because it's one of those things that was so repellent. I guess part of me wanted to believe it didn't exist, and here I am being confronted with it. So what do I do now? I guess I was in this same vein, and I started thinking, who else, what other individual might be hanging out in the lower astral? And because I was in this particular section of the astral, what immediately came to me was another person who had this type of addictive personality in the sickest possible way. And you probably heard of his name, and if you haven't, you should Google it. And I call him Jeffrey. I prefer young women who are many years from legal U.S. voting age of 18, Epstein. He was a fascinating individual. He was put in jail back in 2019. He was accused of a number of things. Trafficking young women was one of those crimes. He very much enjoyed the sense of power over these young women, and he had people bringing them to him. He had many friends, if you want to use those terms, and these friends were people who you've heard their names before. They were powerful politicians. A few of them were presidents, royalty, tech and industry giants. They were friends of this guy, and he would fly them on his airplane, which was nicknamed the Lolita Express, and they would go to his little private island that he had, as well as at times going to his townhome in New York City. And huge numbers of young women were damaged in this process. So I started thinking, I wonder if he's still around. Now, what happened was in 2019, in August, he had been put into prison. Well, jail, actually. He hadn't been tried. And he was on suicide watch, which is just typically what they do for people who are newly put in like that in his situation. He had a cellmate whose name was Nick Tartaglione. I think that's how it's pronounced. However, he was taken off suicide watch, and this Nick guy, who, by the way, was a strangler, who I think used to be a police person, but he was being charged with strangling a couple of folks, interestingly enough. At any rate, he was taken out of the cell, leaving Jeff inside the cell by himself. Now, one night in August, the guards, who were supposed to be making regular rounds, didn't. And around 4 a.m, Jeffy Boy was found unresponsive and had allegedly strangled himself or hung himself with his bed sheets. Now, to say that there is suspicion around this is to say very little. Okay. For instance, the camera that was supposed to be watching this area of the cell block, unfortunately, it just wasn't working that night. Like I said, the guards didn't make their rounds. And let's just say that there was a lot of very powerful people who were very happy to read that morning that their old buddy Jeff had expired. There was rumors that Jeff's money, which came from nowhere, that it came from a variety of situations where he was blackmailing these powerful people, because he had them in various compromising positions and tapes of them with these underage girls. So there was a lot of folks who were very happy that he had expired. So anyway, I went looking for him, and I concentrated on his face and what I thought his vibration would be. And sure enough, I eventually located him. He was still in the lowest level of the astral. When I found him, he was wandering outside of this huge estate on this tropical island. It kind of reminded me of like an ancient Greek with huge Persian influences. And but I didn't have time to look around much because I saw him, and I wanted to see if I could talk with him. So I approached him, and just got right to it. I said, hey, Jeff, they say you committed suicide by tying a bed sheet around your neck. Is that true? Well, I could see him getting hot because you could tell this was something that he was haunted by. And a lot of times when people die violently and they've left unresolved issues, they'll dwell on it. I mean, we've all had thoughts that play around in our heads over and over again, but when you pass over like that, sometimes people really get caught up in it, and that's all they can think about. And what he told me was that he said it was a lie. He said the guards must have let Nick into his cell. Remember, that was the guy I mentioned who was accused of strangling people. And he strangled him with something, he said. He didn't know exactly what it was because he was awakened, out of a dead sleep and was strangled with something by this guy, Nick. And he said there was no way I was going to kill myself. He said I had dirt on a lot of powerful people. I had a lot of powerful friends. And I was going to use that leverage through my lawyer to make sure that I got a low sentence. I said, yeah, well, it looks like you knew too much, Ace. Looks like things didn't work out for you. I said, so do you feel any regret for all those young girls that you hurt? He said, no, they all wanted the money and the power. I was nice to them and took care of them. No one else cared a damn about them. I said, oh, you were a real humanitarian, Jeff. You're not only a criminal, but you're a POS human as well. I said, those girls were damaged for life because of your actions. I'm a father of a daughter, and I know how fragile their self-esteem can be in their early teens. He looked at me like I was a nut or like he'd heard it before. And he said, look, you can cut that crap right out. And he used some language that I can't really use here on this channel. Anyway, he said, I don't need a lecture. I didn't force them to show up week after week. They did that all on their own. I wasn't going to get into that with this idiot. So I said, so you have no regrets at all? He said, sure I do. He goes, I should have left the country earlier before they arrested me. Apparently, he told me he was paying off some prisoners for protection because he knew he was in trouble. His crimes alone are the types of crimes that'll get you wasted, knocked off in prison. But he goes, I should have been paying the effing cops. And then I just said, wow. So what you're going to do now is what? Just haunt your little tropical island here? He goes, well, now he started thinking a little bit. I guess he was feeling sorry for himself. One of those narcissists who only can feel sorry for himself. Not the fact that his victims are damaged. Well, what does he care about that? Anyway, he said, I'm not sure what to do now. I keep seeing this light showing up, but I'm afraid to go anywhere near it because I sense judgment. So I've just been hanging out here. So I thought about this thing for a second. I said, you know what, Jeff? I know a place you'll like. Concentrate on going to a place called the Human Pile. It's totally you. You'll love it. Okay, so that is this week's episode. If you liked it, hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. That way you'll get notified when the new videos are posted. And make sure you leave your questions and comments. And continue, if you will, keeping me in mind, and because I need all the help I can get so I can recover my abilities, because I don't want to just explore the lower astral for the rest of my life. Okay, thanks again. And as always, I will see you on the astral plane.